Amanda, are we live?
Mr. Chairman, we're live.
Okay, thank you. So a couple things to consider today, but before we do that, Diana, would you take roll, please?
Representative Baker?
Here.
Representative Brown?
Here.
Representative Burt?
Here.
Representative Henderson?
Here.
Representative McGuire?
Here.
Representative Obermuller? Representative O'Hearn?
Here.
Representative Stivar?
Present.
Chairman Burkhart.
Here. Okay, so we had indicated we'd talk a little bit about interim topics, and with the time, we go back in at 1:45 and that. So we aren't going to have a detailed discussion of interim topics. A number of you have given me some that you would like. In deference to committee, if you have any others, please get them to me. We will meet with our Senate counterparts, I think in this room on Thursday as a joint committee to talk about interim topics and start moving some things forward. I think all of you have the email on our dates, which are fairly set, but we haven't set any locations yet. So I know one will be in the southern part of the state, probably looking at something in the middle of the state and something somewhere else. Also on those interim committees, it's been discussed of how we will do it. And I think most chairmen are in favor of in-person meetings. And it would only be a rare exception we would do anything by virtual meeting or even allow testimony by virtual. We'll go back to the way we've done it in the past of in-person, but moving around the state gives everybody an opportunity. So that's what I'm hearing. And we have the good chairman of Senate Transportation here, so he may be hearing that for the first time. Right. So, right, Mr. Chairman, we'll let management fight that one out. Just put them in a box, and whoever comes out last is the winner, or first, however you want to look at it. So, with that, we have one bill today to consider, Senate File 73. I know all of us have gotten a lot of information on that bill by a number of groups. I know there are a lot of fairly good feelings both ways on that bill. And I'm going to do something a little interesting, although it's done on occasion, which is I would like to get an idea of the committee's feelings on that bill. Those who would favor Senate File 73 moving forward, those who really would prefer not. So any people wanting to move 73 forward, just a straw poll. You are not committing yourself to anything. So move it forward. Okay, 2. Okay, so I will assume the rest are no's. However, this is an important bill. It's an important consideration. And I would like Senator Case, if he would, to present his bill. I would like the committee to hear from the good senator what his bill does and how it does it. So, Senator, would you do that, please? And you never know. He could change a couple minds.
Chairman, with your lead, I've got to go back across the hall, but if I could have a moment to just maybe introduce a little bit of what the Senate was up to, and then perhaps the senator can take over and describe the bill. Is that all right?
Mr. Chairman, that would be great. Thank you. You may have to scoot a little closer to that microphone.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
There.
thank you. And I won't take long. I just wanted to stop in and support the Senate Revenue Chairman. He brought this bill to Senate Transportation, and honestly, I did not know what kind of reception we'd have in the committee or on the other side. And the more we looked at this opportunity, the more the Senate came around to the fact that that it's really something that we thought we ought to look at. The timing of it is appropriate. It's really something that is an opportunity that's not going to come around again potentially. And so I commend it to you. I think as it rolled along, I think the Senate really warmed up to what this would do. And the piece that I think is the most attractive is that if we adopt this bill, we've got literally 3 years to watch this plan roll out before we have to do anything. We can work with the federal folks back in the Beltway. We can receive some permission back there. We can come back and our YDOT folks can go to work. This committee can go to work, our joint committee, over the next couple of years. We can map it. We can produce it. If we don't like it, we can pull the plug at any point along the way. And so I think that's one of the most attractive pieces, Mr. Chairman. I will leave the good senator to speak with you about the bill, but honestly, you might find yourself moving a little bit more toward this opportunity by the time the good senator presents it today. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know that Chairman Case usually does do a good job of presenting his bills.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You bet.
Appreciate it, committee.
No.
Thank you.
okay. Chairman Case, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm happy to be here. I don't think I've ever came and presented a bill to committee after they'd already decided to kill it, though. So I hope maybe you would open up your minds a little bit and realize that what we're doing here is setting something in motion. And if anything, Wyoming needs things set in motion. Because from the revenue standpoint, we don't have much to hang our hats on. I'm over in the Senate voting for every cut that comes along. I'm also voting for revenue measures. I haven't seen any yet. I chair the revenue committee, and you all know that's not the best job in the world. It wasn't the one I asked for, but I'm looking for solutions for Wyoming that can help us get together and move forward somehow. It's going to take a big combination. This tolling bill is a tool in that, really significant tool that helps to potentially could solve our problems with Interstate 80 and free up a bunch of money to be distributed elsewhere in the state on our highway system. And I want you just to think big for a second. Just think kind of big what it could accomplish. It's a mountain of money, depending on how the tolls are set. And YDOT's got a presentation that'll tell you how much, but at very modest tolling rates of $10 for a passenger car to go entire 400 miles across I-80 and $100 for a truck, they estimate, YDOT's estimate, you'll see it in their presentation, is that it would net $170 million a year. That's a bunch of money. Now, if we use toll revenue to fund I-80, we're not going to have federal funds for I-80, but that's only about 50 million total, I guess. Probably not all of that goes to I-80. They have the numbers. It'll free up a lot of money to make improvements in highways clear across the state. Where I came to this is because you all in the interim, some of you were on the interim committee, so you had the road use charge. Decent idea. It didn't fly. I guess we're not ready for that. That could be a decade out. I don't know. The revenue committee proposed a fuel tax. It didn't come from your committee, it came from the revenue committee. That bill is dead. So we don't have a lot of options. And what I've learned on the revenue committee is that almost everything takes a long time to stand up, whether it's a new, income tax, if you want to think way out there, property tax, sales tax, other kinds of fees take a long time. Tolling, as it's been proposed previously, was a 10-year deal. Took 10 years to get down the road to that. This is a shortened up time frame. We're more talking in the 4 or 5 years. But that's something that you set in motion, and you don't have a dime of toll revenues until we get there. That's why I think you should pass it. And if next year we get bunch of revenue, or we decide we just don't like this approach, pull the plug on it. Pull the plug on it. So the other big things we could do, we're not talking about a tolling system that has toll booths and the old, and back east, they used to have these toll highways where they had plazas where you had to buy your food, your gasoline, everything from the toll plaza. So local communities were completely cut out. You go to E470 now, that's kind of what we're looking at. You can get on and off, go to, visit local businesses. There's no toll booths. It's all license plate readers. Or in some instances, you can have the Easy Pass system, which has been around for about 2 decades and allows you to do it electronically, and you get a little bit better rate. If we had significant revenues on Interstate 80, it could be a wonderful asset for Wyoming for the next 50 years. And all our I-80 communities, they wouldn't have to worry about it because it would be taken care of. And it would be a true asset to our nation in this transcontinental transportation system. Fundamental. So if you're an I-80 community, right now you got to be wondering how we're going to pay for this thing. How are we going to fix the potholes? How are we going to keep the surface up? We're not doing it. We're not keeping up all around Wyoming. This would let us keep up. That means that road will be a viable economic return for those communities and for Wyoming. If you don't have toll booths, then you could decide all sorts of things like what is the minimum amount of free traffic that every person could have. It has to be non-residents and residents alike, all vehicles. But supposing you had 50-mile free passage per day for everybody. That means you'd only be, if you drove the entire interstate, you'd pay for 350 miles. But if you drove from Rock Springs to Green River and back, you wouldn't pay anything. If you drove across Laramie, Cheyenne, we could set that at anything that we want so that you could commute to Laramie and back, if that's what we choose. These are good ideas that keep communities vibrant and help do something for our people. And just imagine another one. They talk about, well, trucks are going to take off and go somewhere else. Not for $100 they're going to do that. But if they did, one place they might go is Old Highway 30 from Laramie to Walcott Junction. But you know what? Over time, with this extra money, we could do something with that road. We might toll it. We might rebuild it. Maybe in the end, we end up with Interstate 80 being where Highway 30 is. I mean, think big. One thing that's important, I think, is that I-80 is a barrier to wildlife migration. Huge band across the bottom of our state. With money, we could improve the migration of wildlife, make the roads safer, and connect historical routes for these animals that used to migrate across there. That's a big deal in and of itself. Mr. Chairman, there's a difference in damage done by trucks versus cars. We could recognize that with differential tolls based on the vehicles and the damage to the road surface. That's a big deal. That's a big deal for the future when you hear the statistics, like 80% of the truck traffic is just passing through. Car traffic's probably about the same. And we're stuck with those impacts. Mr. Chairman, I hope all of you will think about this a little bit more. I'll go through the bill really quick.
Mr. Chairman, if
Yes.
I might, and a little out of normal here, I think your bill has a lot of merit.
Mhm.
I really do. A number of us weren't on this committee in the interim is part of the issue and that, but I do want to hear what you have to say because your ideas are intriguing. And I think it's something that we need to hear and need to consider and that. And I don't want you to feel that we dislike you or your bill. I think knowledge or a lack of knowledge is an issue on our part. So that's why I would like you to go through your bill. I'd like to hear from the department also.
Great.
And that, and to me, your ideas are important. And we need to move forward with some of those, as you said, big ideas. And we need to start thinking in that manner. And that's why I would really like you to present your bill to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be delighted. So, and I just want to say, this isn't the build a third lane and toll that lane. Okay. That is an option under the federal programs that you can add tolled lanes. You see them in big cities. You see express lanes and they are tolled. That really wouldn't work in Wyoming. If we added a third lane all the way, who's going to get in it and pay the toll? It just wouldn't happen. So this is a program to toll for the maintenance and rebuilding of I-80. Now down the road, we could add that third lane. We could. And imagine how safe that road could be if we kept trucks out of the one lane. You know, my fear is that the road is unsafe. My fear is these huge pileups of, you know, and I drive that road. Been driving it for 50, well, not quite, 48 years. That's a long time to be driving that road, and had some really close calls. I have had a truck come into my lane, cross it, and then there was a huge pileup on the other side, and the trucks were coming down my lane, and I had to go off the road. And that was clear weather. You know, we need more room on that road. We need a better, safer road. We owe it to our citizens to get them that. This is a way to get them that. And this is a way to protect those I-80 communities, not cut them out, not hurt them, enhance them. This bill is, I tried to find a House sponsor and couldn't find one. So I want you all to take it on and be the sponsors. It's all yours. Creates a highway tolling program. It grants powers to the Transportation Commission and granting the toll authority for I-80. It grants the authority. That's going to be key. The trouble, because that's the only way they're going to be go to the federal government and ask for the program. And that's why other states have failed. We're going to succeed. Is that we're granting them authority, they can go do it. Now, does that mean we can't change our minds? No. You have 3 years at least that you can change your mind. So the first part is all new language created. There's a purpose clause on page 2 to finance, construct, operate, maintain Interstate 80 and accommodate the needs of the traveling public through the safe, efficient, convenient, and modern vehicular traffic it is necessary and in the public interest to provide for the financing, construction, operation, regulation, and maintenance of Interstate 80 under a tolled configuration. Next page, on page 3, these are just definitions. They should sound familiar: account, bond, chief, commission, construct, department, director, Interstate 80, local government, project, project master plan, project phase, toll, tolling program chief, toll revenues. Bottom of page 5, 2416-103, this is the authority to toll. The department has authority to impose tolls on Interstate 80 and take all other actions necessary for the project pursuant to a project master plan for which the legislature has passed authorizing legislation. Statewide tolling program is created on page 6, 2416-104. This grants authority with the commission's approval for the director to operate a statewide tolling program that shall be limited to the project and shall be in accordance with the project master plan. And that it operates as a division of the department. There's an account created, 2416-105 is a special toll revenue account. There's an account created where all the toll revenues are going to go, but that's not all of it. There will not be any revenues from any other taxes that will go into that account. It says the department may deposit other monies into the account, but in no event shall revenue from any tax available for general purposes be deposited into the account. And all the funds in the account shall be expended only for the repayment of debt for the project as otherwise authorized under this chapter. Line 11 on page 7, the state treasurer invests the funds. There's an annual accounting and preparation on the bottom of page 7. The commission has I'm on page 8. The commission has authority to expend funds from the project. They can pay for the principal on bonds, to fund the administrative planning and financing, construction, operation, maintenance, or repair of the project, and for the acquisition of land within the Interstate 80 corridor. They can take unrestricted money. I'm on page 9. And from the state highway fund to the account, it's in essence a loan to be paid back with toll revenues later. you'll see on page 8, the department may use excess funds from the account to reimburse the state highway fund for monies deposited in the account together with interest at the rate earned on a pooled fund investments for the period of the loan. Part F, once the department has paid the costs of constructing the project, including reasonable and prudent contingencies, paid all the debt service on all the bonds issued to finance the project, and reimburse the state highway fund for any state highway fund monies transferred to the account under this chapter plus interest, the commission shall recommend to the legislature to adjust the initial toll rates on the project so that toll revenues are as close to reasonably possible to the amount required for the ongoing operation, maintenance, and necessary replacement of the project. So after we get it off the ground, we pay these initial costs back, and then we come back and we set toll revenues for the future. The toll rates on page 10, the commission shall recommend to your committee, to the Joint Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs Interim Committee, the initial toll rates consistent with the project master plan and federal tolling requirements, and such that the department can pay for necessary reconstruction and maintenance of the Interstate 80 corridor and administrative expenses. The initial toll rates and any subsequent adjustments to toll rates shall be set by the legislature. If recommended or required under an approved project master plan, subsequent rates may be set by the legislature to generate revenues necessary to fund any impact assistance program available to local governments. You'll see that in the master plan, which is coming up next. The department shall develop and submit to the commission a project master plan, which includes the goals for the project. Page 11, the physical project description, construction phasing and estimated capital costs, the tolling approach and toll rate structure, which takes into account, among other considerations, impacts of different vehicles on the road surface. Operation and maintenance plans, toll revenue projections and financial plans, recommended civil penalties for failing to pay a toll when required, identification of persons or entities exempt from tolls, construction of a consideration of a free minimum travel distance available to all traffic. You can't just do it for Wyoming residents or something like that. Can't just do it for cars. It's got to be for all traffic. The results of a study of potential impacts of tolling on I-80 communities, and the feasibility of establishing a program that would provide impact assistance, if appropriate, to local communities. So we should talk about that for 1 second. This is going to be good for local communities. A world-class highway, like this is going to be like the Autobahn or something, that is going to be in well-maintained, great surface, safer, better for wildlife, is going to be a boon to these communities. They live on I-80. They need I-80. We need to give them a way to keep I-80 viable for the next 50 years. This is it. Provision of any application of criminal and traffic laws, excuse me, provision of any law enforcement, public outreach program, plans for improvements to wildlife migration and traffic safety. Talked about wildlife before. That's a really big deal in some parts of Wyoming. And when you think of just that barrier across the entire state, and there are wildlife crossings in there now, but they're pretty darn small. They're kind of added on. This could allow us to actually do some really amazing things for wildlife and make the roads safer. Any federally required information or federal considerations that may be relevant to the project, and any other information necessary to implement the project. Once the commission approves a project master plan, the plan shall be submitted to the Joint Transportation, Highway, and Military Affairs Interim Committee for consideration. We should talk about that a little bit. I don't imagine that that's going to be the first time that you hear about this plan. You're not going to go off 3 years. You're going to have a report on the plan, where they're at, what they're thinking about all the time. You're going to be on top of it. I know you are. And if you say it's going awry, you will recommend to pull the plug. And that will just take a legislative move. Commission powers. Commission has the power to direct the department and assign department tasks required under this chapter to develop, prepare, or cause to be prepared and improve the project master plan, issue bonds, make recommendations to the legislature to increase or decrease the fees, to establish, charge, and collect fees and charges for the use of other property of the project, subject to the approved project master plan, to acquire, hold title, and dispose of real and personal property as necessary in the exercise of its powers and performance of its duties, to acquire or cause to be acquired any right of way, to make and to enter into contracts or agreements, including intergovernmental agreements or agreements with private persons necessary or incidental to the exercise of its power, to employ or contract for the services of consultants, to plan, acquire, construct, operate, regulate, maintain the project, to construct, maintain, and operate stations or electronic means for the collection of tolls, to set and adopt on an annual basis a budget, to restrict specific vehicles from driving in designating lanes within the project based on the master plan, to contract for and accept any gifts, grants, loans, or funds upon the issuance of a bond, of any bond authorized by this chapter, to report to the state treasurer in such form as the treasurer may require the terms of all the bonds, including the maturity of the issuance. This is not later than September 1st, 2020, and not later than September 1st of each year thereafter. The commission, through the department, shall present a report to the Joint Transportation, Highways, Military Affairs Interim Committee and the Joint Appropriations Committee. The report shall include a summary of the project's activities for the previous year, a statement of current toll rates, a summary of the status of any current construction or other development of the project, a statement of the project's revenues and expenses, a summary of the results of any evaluation of the project conducted by the department, and any recommendations for toll rate or other modifications to the master plan. The next page gives them rulemaking authority. 2416-110 talks about the bonds. Subject to the bottom part, the commission may issue bonds in principal amounts that the commission determines necessary to provide sufficient funds for achieving the tasks required by the project master plan and necessary for the project. All bonds issued under this chapter are negotiable instruments under the laws of the state unless expressly provided to the contrary on the face of the bonds. The commission may issue and have outstanding bonds in aggregate amount authorized and adopted by the master plan. All proceeds from the sale of bonds have to go into the project. All bond obligations issued by the commission under this chapter are payable solely out of funds in the account. Doesn't bind, no money's coming from the rest of the state government. Bond proceeds shall be used only for the project as provided in the project master plan. The bond shall bear interest at the rates, be executed and delivered at times and in denominations, be of terms and maturities, be in bearer form or in registered form as to principal and interest or principal alone, and bear manual or facsimile signatures. Bonds may be payable in installments. Bonds and interest may be payable at a time and place, whether within or outside the state. Bonds issued by the commission under this chapter may contain an option to redeem them and all the price of redemption and things. And I'm on page 19. Any bonds of the commission may be sold at or above below par value. The commission will pay all the necessary legal fees, expenses, et cetera, et cetera. J, subject to the aggregate limits in the project master plan. There's a typo there. It says master plan. That's interesting on line 12. Additional bonds for a particular purpose may be issued, provided that later issues shall recognize and protect any prior pledge made in any prior issue. The commission may provide for the issuance of bonds under this chapter to refund any project bonds then outstanding, including the payment of any redemption premium, any interest, etc. Refunding shall be accomplished in a particular manner. And here we get to the page 20, we talk about the security. The principal and interest on any project bonds issued by the commission may be secured by a pledge of any revenues authorized under this article for the applicable bonds. The bondholders may not look to any general or other fund for payment of the bonds except the revenues pledged. Therefore, the bond shall not constitute an indebtedness of a debt within the meaning of any constitutional or statutory provision or limitation. These aren't obligations of the state of Wyoming in a general sense. These are obligations against the revenues from tolling. Line 19, each pledge agreement or other instrument made for the benefit or security of any project bond is a valid binding from the time it is made. The revenues and other monies pledged are immediately subject to the lien of pledge without delivery or further act. The lien is valid and binding against persons having claims of any kind against the commission, whether or not the persons have actual notice of the lien. The commission may provide in the proceedings in which the bonds are authorized that any part of the project or project master plan may be constructed, reconstructed, or improved by the commission, and may also provide for the time and manner of requisites for disbursements to be made for the cost of construction and for all the certificates and approvals of construction and disbursements the commission considers necessary. 24-16-112, the bonds are exempt from taxation. That'll get us, may not matter so much in terms of the income and the interest environment now, but it is an important consideration for investors. Bonds are legal investments on page 22. State pledge not to impair the bondholder's rights and remedies at the bottom of page 22. Getting out of bonds on page 23. Assistance by state agencies upon the commission's request. Any state agency may lend technical assistance, render advice, and attend meetings with the directors and employees to be able to carry out these duties. And then we're in section 2, which is of course amendments. We create the state highway fund and we specify in there, and it's way down on page 24. It's really carving out an exception for the bonds issued under this project. Page 25, the new language, they're going in 24-8-101, the purposes of these bonds, but line 13 through 15, bonds issued under this chapter are separate and distinct from bonds issued under WS 24-16-110 for the purpose of Interstate 80. We're just making clear that these bonds are separate. Section 3 is an immediate effective date. Immediate effective date does not mean that we start tolling I-80 on next Monday. It means that we start the process, which is a laborious process and needs to be begun now because there's only a certain number of slots available. And if we don't seize the moment, and remember, seize the moment is a 3-year ordeal, maybe 5-year ordeal, then we have nothing and we'll lose our slot. So you can't vote no. You have to vote yes to get it started. And then you can vote no next year when you decide that you don't want to do this. With that, I yield for questions. I know the department has a really good presentation. They've done a lot of work on this. I appreciate your indulgence.
Questions for the good chairman? Question? Okay, Chair, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Chairman Case. My question is related to page 12, Roman 9, consideration of free minimum travel distance available to all traffic. And in discussions with people about this issue, it seems like a lot of the local traffic is really, they're willing to toll out-of-state traffic. So is this the only remedy for relief for in-state people?
Mr. Chairman, I think it's probably the best one, perhaps. I've heard talk of another one which would involve, in essence, the state paying the fees, the tolls for in-state people. We pay it out of other funds. I don't know where we're going to get the other funds, but that the state would actually do that. I think this is a better one. It's just easier to implement. You guys have all done now E470, have you? I'm kind of amazed at how well that works. It's never messed up on me. And I never felt that it was erroneous or that it didn't take account of where I went or it didn't have the date right. And yet it knows where I got on, where I got off, because it follows your car basically with photographs. And we share our license plate registry. But that means that we could also figure out the minimum distance every single day. We have the time and we know the traffic so that people who don't go far enough to trigger the tolls, they don't get a bill. I think that's the best solution for our local folks. It's the only one I think that could work. The idea of the state paying local people's tolls, I'm not quite sure how we do it or where we'd get the money. We could use severance revenues, for example, or something like that, but that would be a big deal. And you're going to see how much money it is. So roughly if 20% of the traffic on I-80 is local traffic and 80% is outside of Wyoming, then you can take that 170 million and apply the same percentages. So that's what we'd have to come up with, somewhere in the range of $35 million to compensate. And that would reduce our take on the rest of it, but it could be done, I suppose.
Other questions? Representative Obermuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Case. So does this contemplate no construction starting for at least 3 years?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I know the answer to that. It takes a while to get it implemented. We do allow them to borrow against a future implementation of tolling, but until we get the authorization from the federal government, I don't think we have a way to start spending money yet. Will it take that long to get the authorization? I think the Transport Department will have a better idea. But indeed, we do envision spending money before the tolling thing is put together. It's going to cost money to do it. We can issue bonds and we can bond against the future revenues. But we couldn't be able to do that, I think, until the Federal Highway Administration gave us some kind of a green light.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Case, could you please expand on, you mentioned the number of slots available, and that would be the slot and application by the state too. Could you expand on which agency the state would be applying to and how those slots work and approximately how long it takes that agency, federal agency, to consider an application? Thank you.
Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, I may not be the best for that. I know the department is going to cover that in their presentation a little bit. The essence of it is that there is, I believe, 3 slots. One is filled, one is potentially filled. We're down possibly to the last one. That other states have preceded us and asked to be in those slots. They were either turned down or pulled back because they did not have the authority. It was a situation where we're granting authority for them to go get this in this bill. And these other states went to seek the tolling and they did not have the authority. So a number of them tried, a number of them didn't get it. We are going to give the authority so that, and I don't know if the department's already talking back there, but they will start talking right away. That's why I think we got a good shot. It's so important to the country. This is a national, vital corridor. And I just think it's not the same as the Suez Canal. I grant you that, but it's a pretty darn big deal. And if the road is not usable or the road becomes less usable or it's not able to handle the future demands, it hurts the country. That's why I think we got a chance. I really do, Representative McGuire. I really do. And the department's got a couple slides on that.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman. So one of the biggest things that I have heard since this has passed out of the Senate, and of course we've been bombarded as a committee, is the ambiguity, right? And so this idea that we're granting authority and a little bit of an autonomy at this point, and granted, we've seen the slides. Anybody who's heard about this tolling program has seen the same slides. There was the first slide of 25 cents a mile, then there was 10 cents a mile. Mm-hmm. There's this huge autonomy and this huge ambiguity of what's going on. And I think that's what scares a lot of people about this.
Possibly.
So I understand that we're granting authority to move into this process. And like you have said multiple times, we can cut the cord at any time. What can you say to those that are sitting behind you and or listening in right now about the ambiguity not being so scary? And I mean, I hate to say it in any other terms, but that's truly what we're doing. What can you do to try to calm those fears?
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a really good question, perhaps a tough question. And I'm not afraid of the legislature or the Department of Transportation, because the legislature can write a law. We can pass a law next fall. We can have a special session. I'm not afraid of that if we see things going awry. I am terrified of what's going to happen to Wyoming if we don't keep our infrastructure up, if we can't maintain that road, if we can't begin to partially solve the big revenue and expenditure problem of the state, which believe me, it's huge. It could make Wyoming kind of a ghost town. And you pick the time out in the future when we can't invest in infrastructures, we can't invest in university, we don't have the tax base, and the mineral industry is largely gone because people around the world reject fossil fuels. And that's what's terrifying. I'm terrified that it takes so long to set up any revenue streams, and it is so difficult to do things like get rid of tax exemptions. Or I'm less worried about the transportation department, the highway commission, and our ability to rein this in should it go awry. Not worried about that. Terrified by what is happening on the ground as we're slipping away. Thank you.
Other questions? Questions? Okay. Senator, I have a couple.
Sure.
on that, and I share your vision for I-80. Not to make a pun out of it, but to me, that's the commercial superhighway in Wyoming. It really is, compared to any other road, any other facility we have.
And for the nation too, sir.
Yes, I don't know where I got it. I heard that 13% of all commerce in the United States passes through Wyoming on Interstate 80, which is a very large number when you consider the size. But one question I have, a couple, and I probably won't go into every one of them. We'll be here all day. Is the issue of being able to pull the plug at any time. When I read the bill, I don't really see that specifically called out in the bill. Would it take another piece of legislation from the legislature in order to pull the plug on this if this bill was to go through?
Yes, sir. Yeah, yes, sir. And it would no doubt come from your committee. And you guys would have to decide, this is not working. This is not what we signed up for. Put in a bill, and it would be subject to the restrictions of the budget session 2/3 or the general session straight up. You'd have to put in a bill to kill it.
Okay.
But we always could do that.
I'll give the committee ample time. Representative Baker, I don't want to hog this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my other question is in regards to the lane here.
Are you referring to the free lane or?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, I was wondering about the logistics of that, because my understanding is that if we move forward with this, we really couldn't restrict traffic on any of the lanes.
Mr. Chairman, I think he's right.
Chairman Case.
That may be a legacy of a previous version. I'm trying to see what kind of consideration there would be of free lane. So my understanding with respect to tolling program to add lanes is that we have to maintain free lanes in at least in the number of the ones that we add. And that was at one time was a proposal that I think people were kind of thinking about. And Representative Baker, this may be a legacy of that, but the department may have a comment on that piece. I know exactly what piece you're thinking, and I agree with you. It doesn't quite fit.
Other questions? So, Chairman Case, when I look at the issue of the amount of toll, the cost per the toll, and the issue of the potential for free travel, is there a particular reason why there isn't some, say, minimum amount inserted in the bill at this time on, say, a toll? Let's start with that. Is there a particular reason why a toll isn't specified?
Mr. Chairman, I think we have to figure that out. The department they made those two estimates, and then those estimates don't really consider a minimum travel distance of, say, you know, say the minimum travel distance is 100 miles. That may be really exciting. I'm just using a round number. You'd have to refigure your tolls. You'd either take a hit on the tolls or you'd raise the toll amounts to make up the difference. I just looked at those example tolls and I thought the higher example in the YDOT handout, that looks pretty cheap to me, if you want my opinion. $100 for a truck to go clear across, $10 for a car. If we were to, and that's based on 402 miles. If you were to base it on 350 miles for all the way through, you could recalculate that, but it was not going to be that big of a recalculation.
Any other questions? Okay. Senator, would you just stay there and stay with us, please?
You want me to sit here? You want to
Please,
sit back?
no, you're welcome to stay right there.
Okay, yes, sir.
And as we have questions potentially, I'd like you to be there rather than have to come back up. So
Yes, sir.
Amanda, could you admit the Department of Transportation, please? I believe that's Director Reiner and his people.
Mr. Chairman, they're in the webinar.
Okay, Director, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, a fine day to you. For the record, Luke Reiner, Director of YDOT. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to bring up a presentation and rapidly walk through some of the key points if that would be helpful. If we don't want the presentation, I'll walk through the same points without it.
How long is your presentation, Director?
Mr. Chairman, it's about 10 slides and it says, I can rapidly go through it.
Okay, go ahead. Amanda,
you.
go ahead. Bring up or Director, you can share your screen with us. Either one works.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, as we get started, probably just a couple points. Please stop me as I go through here because I think this will generate some questions. I would certainly thank the bringers of this bill. It is, as the Transportation Commission, you're well aware that we are in need of funding. Just a couple comments before we get into some of the meat of this is the original study to toll I-80 dates back to 2008 and 2009. It was re-looked at in 2018, and those are the facts and figures that you'll see today because there has been no study since 2018. As this bill came forward, we pulled up that data, and that's what you'll be seeing today. For us, tolling I-80 does make sense based on the traffic, and I'll just maybe walk you through the slides. I guess maybe one other thought is that the timeline you'll see today is significantly different than the timeline that was presented several years ago after the 2018 study, based on some additional guidance that we received from the bringers of this bill. And I'll talk you through that as we go through. But if we could go to the next slide, please. And really the second comment down is how much money we spent on construction and maintenance on I-80 in the last 5 years, really $312 million. The fourth bullet down talks about in the next 5 years, or in our state transportation improvement plan, we currently have about $330 million programmed for I-80 projects. But here's probably the key takeaway from you, and that's the third and fifth bullet combined, is to adequately maintain I-80 today, it's $100 million, it's basically $110 million a year. We currently spend about $65 million a year, and we leave the rest as unfunded because we just don't have the money. So as we watch, we know I-80 is getting worse, but those are the numbers. So we basically spent about $65 million, should be spending about 110. Let me give you a couple other numbers, not on this slide, to put things in perspective. One, as Chairman Case indicated, I-80 is 402 miles long. So if you take 400, and we maintain 6,733 miles of road. So 6% of our road in the state of Wyoming is I-80. Our average construction budget so that's construction budget, is $340 million a year. I already said that we spend about $65 million a year on I-80. So if you divide 65 million by 340 million, we spend 19% of our construction dollars on 6% of our roads. And then here's sort of another fact for you. In Wyoming, we drive 2.5 billion miles a year. Of those, 10.4 million miles are driven on I-80. So 24% of all miles driven in the state are on I-80. So there's some of the facts and figures behind what's going on our primary, on the Suez Canal of Wyoming. If you flip to the next slide then, please. I won't go into any detail there, but if you have questions, that's the detail behind our $65 million a year. If you go to the next slide, here's a couple other facts and figures that we would plan on. They just draw your attention down to the very bottom bullet, and that says 80% of truck traffic on I-80 is through traffic. So it starts somewhere not in Wyoming, and it ends somewhere not in Wyoming. It passes through. So there's a number for you. Here's a couple other numbers not on the slide. For the entire state, the truck traffic that's out of state is 62%, and the in-state is 38%. So significantly, more through traffic on I-80. In terms of cars, for the entire state, out of state is 15%, and in-state is 85%. And so we think that getting the out-of-state traffic number in cars on 80 has proved to be a little bit more difficult. We think it's probably about 20%. So there's, again, some numbers for you. As has been indicated, we know damage on the road comes primarily from trucks. If you flip over then to the next slide, here's just a couple things to recap. And Senator Casey did a good job in setting the conditions here. Well, let me just review a couple things about tolling rules from the federal perspective. One is tolling is generally not allowed, and that there are a few exceptions. One of the rules that's been indicated already is you must treat everybody the same. Trucks, cars, in-state, out-of-state must be treated the same. That's one of the golden rules on tolling on federal highways. If you look at the next sort of item in bold, this application would be under what's called the Interstate System Reconstruction and Rehabilitation Pilot. All right. As Senator Case said, think about this as toll to maintain, not toll to build. And that's a very important concept here, and really the one that prior research has shown that we would best be suited for. As the senator indicated, there's only 3 slots available, and there's certainly one open as we speak. It is a rigorous process. In fact, nobody has accomplished it yet. But here is some of the thoughts.
Yes,
Director. I want to stop you right there as you're saying that, Director. This is one of my biggest concerns about this program as we're going through, and I believe the senator touched on this, but if I could get some more information on you, as you just said, numerous states have done this and not a single one has made it through. Can you tell the committee and myself how and or why none of the committee or none of the states that have attempted to do this have been successful?
Director?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, thank you for that. My understanding is, the states that have tried this could be numbered on one hand and not take all this, not take all your fingers. So it's not a lot. And my understanding is it had to do with, one is this business about having tolling authority. You have to have tolling authority to get this program going. The second one then becomes part of that, the financial plan of, do you have a good financial plan to move forward? And besides that, I'd be getting beyond my level of expertise. What I would tell this committee is that if this passes, then within a very short time frame, I'm getting on a plane and flying to DC and sitting down with the administrator of the Federal Highway Administration and saying, hey, listen, we're really serious about this because the state passed it, and I'm interested in ensuring success in this program. And we start building the framework for a plan. And that would be my recommended path to success here. It'll take some work. And so to Senator Case's point is, it's if we think we want to go down this road, the time to start is now. And I'm comfortable with, hey, at some point we figure this is not a good plan for Wyoming. We pull it and go another way. But that's really my thoughts on your question there, Representative.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Director. I appreciate the information there. The next question that I have for you is, we've heard in this committee that you are already in the hole with expenditures and everything else going around here. And so my next concern comes to the soft spot in my heart for the state employees that are going to be picking up this tab and doing this work. What are we going to be adding this to current job titles? And is this something that they're going to be picking up on top of their current duties? Or what are we going to be deleting off of their plates as they're working through this? It seems to me like this is a pretty heavy lift. And so I'm curious, what's going to get left in the dust as we're spinning the tires on this?
Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, I tell you, I do have a team of planners and special project and we will assign this project to them. You know, as we worked over the last interim on other alternate revenue sources, really it would be that same team that I would redirect this way. So in terms of the ability to manage it at a department level, I'm comfortable that we have the capacity to do that.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, my question relates to the three participation slots available. Are those, is that set in federal statute? Is that done administratively through an agency? How difficult would it be if these slots filled up to create more slots?
Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Baker, my understanding is that's set in federal statute. And just the inquiry basically says, hey, there's a slot available. And so my understanding is if this bill passes, we call Federal Highway and say, hey, listen, we're really interested in, they know we're doing that. And my understanding is that we will not lose that slot.
All right. Director, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple other comments on this slide that we've talked about. Probably the key one is that any revenue that you secure through tolling must go back to the facility that you are tolling for. So all money that you would raise tolling I-80 must by law go back to I-80. That's the concept of, if you know, currently we're spending money on 80. If you raise revenue for I-80, then that should free up that revenue to go elsewhere in the state, which is one of the ripple effects of the program. Let me flip to the next slide then. In terms of the proposed bill, and the senator did a good job in walking through it. For me, the elevator speech for the bill becomes, hey, it grants tolling authority. It tells the department to go build a plan and bring it back to the legislature for approval, which would either be granted or denied. If it's granted, then it authorizes the authority to bond, which is key as we start the construction process. And I'll walk you through that timeline in a couple slides. If we flip to the next slide, then one of the key items on this one is one of the questions that comes up is, hey, you know, a while ago you said it was 9 or 10 years. Now it's 4 to 5. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is that there is more items acting concurrently versus sequential in this plan, which I'm comfortable with. It increases some of the cost up front because we would do more with a consultant. But in the end, if it gets us, the decision of the body is to proceed this way, then it gets us there quicker. Once you have provisional approval to proceed from the federal government, then you have 3 years to really have it implemented. And some of the things that take time in this process are listed at the bottom, which certainly is environmental considerations, raising the money to start doing the projects, and then working with the MPO. So that's the Metropolitan Planning organization. The only one we have on the I-80 corridor is Sheridan. It's Cheyenne. We actually have 2 in the state, Cheyenne and Casper, but certainly we would be dealing with Cheyenne here. And then other stakeholders, because part of my mind here as we would proceed is certainly a lot of public involvement in what this plan would be. If you flip to the next slide, then this is a quick summary to the best of our knowledge of what the timeline would look like. So if the bill passes, then we have tolling authority, you know, effective really the second quarter, you know, now of the year 21. And so really what that says is, hey, we've got to start the planning process. We'll hire a consultant and we'll start drafting the plan. As I said before, part of that is going to DC, sitting down with federal highways and making sure we're on the same sheet of music in terms of the road ahead. I would anticipate that we would have, you know, it'd probably take 1.5 years or 2 years to work through that process of working with the federal highways. And so I'd expect to have an approved plan in 23. And then what happens is, I don't think we start raising money. I don't think we start spending a lot of money until we have an approved plan, which is approved by federal highways and then also approved by state legislature. And then that sets the condition for us designing what we're going to do. Now, the design is to maintain and reconstruct I-80, not to rebuild it, or not to add a new lane, as has been discussed. And so I think we'd look to start the building process probably in 26 is how we see that going. And that's to our best estimate as we know it today. So if you flip to the next slide, again, I think, you know, there's a lot of concern, and I understand it about these rates that are out there. But here's the thing to keep in mind. Part of the approval from the federal highway is you can only toll for what you plan to do. And it needs to be reasonable, because from the federal perspective, you got to have people running up and down that road. And there's always this concern about diversion, and nobody's interested in having a road that no trucks are on. And so if you go back to the 2018 study, one of the estimates they used was 25 cents per mile for a heavy truck, has been talked about, and then 10% of that rate for a car, or in this case, 2.5 cents a mile. You can do the math at 402 miles across the state. But the net revenue from that toll is estimated at $170 million. And the diversion rate that they used is 40%. Now, personally, I think that's probably high, but that's what the report showed. And so that's what we indicated on this slide. So those are the numbers at 25 cents.
Just a minute, Director. Representative Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, in your introduction, I think I saw that we had 329 million programmed. I believe that's per year, and there's 65.1 million coming in now per year. And 43 million over the STIP is needed. So with those figures, Director, how does that compare? How would shifting to this tolling process, this tolling program, be considered, a solution in terms of that meeting those projects? How many average projects per year and so on? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Director?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Representative Henderson. So here's, I think, the simple maybe way to think about this. If you raise $170 million on I-80 through tolling, then you'll spend $170 million of toll money on I-80. So that would give you $100 million to maintain it like you need to, and $70 million to reconstruct it, which is the goal, is to make that road better for the next 50 years so we can keep driving on it. Then we already said we already spend $60 million a year on I-80. So we take that $60 million of other money, so that's fuel tax that we raise in the state and money we get from the federal government, and we push that to other roads in the state of Wyoming. So the $170 million funds I-80, and all revenue and all current revenue that we spend from other sources on I-80 is freed up to go to other roads around the state. So that's what happens with the toll money.
Representative Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Director, to be clear then, the 340 or 329 million figure, that's all the projects in the state, or is that just I-80? Director?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Representative Henderson, that 329 million that I referred to on page or on slide 1, that would be how many projects we have planned for I-80, which would all be maintenance type projects for the next 5 years. So that's what those are, when you look at the road plan in the state, it's well thought out into the future. It's all documented in the state transportation improvement plan. And that's a 5-year plan. So if you pull that plan today and you say, tell me what projects we're going to do on I-80 in this plan, there's $329 million worth of those projects.
Okay. All right, Director. So, Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Director, one quick question with regard to what you have learned about the program possibilities so far. Do you have any fear that if we did go forward with I-80 tolling, that there would be a subsequent reduction of an equivalent amount with regard to fewer fuel taxes returned to the state of Wyoming or federal mineral royalty revenue returned to the state of Wyoming? Thank you.
Director?
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, a negative on both accounts. One, the formula is really set by step, and I've received zero indication that if we toll that would reduce that. And in terms of my knowledge of how the federal mineral royalty works, it would not affect that at all. Now, one change that could be made is in the state in terms of allocation at the state level of FMR. Certainly, this body controls that. And my hope would be that it's not diverted, but it certainly could be.
Okay, Director, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next slide then is really the numbers at 10%. And you can see there at 10 cents per mile on trucks and 1 cent per mile per cars, that raised about $80 million. And the diversion rate there is 20%. And so those are the numbers at a lower rate. I don't know what the rate would, if you asked me today what the rate would be, to answer really one of the questions from before is, I don't know. That's what we need to study and see what's reasonable and set. And so if you go to the next slide, which is the last slide, there is, as Senator Case discussed, would be 0 and 10 of having a manned toll booth. And so the question becomes then, where do you put the electronic toll booths across the state? Because that's where you collect the tolls. So there's an option out there that has one toll booth somewhere out maybe by Wamsutter or somewhere in the very middle of the state. And there's other plans out there that have more. And so each toll booth adds about, about $19 million, correction, about $3.5 million in cost originally. And certainly to the discussion of, hey, what's the free mileage? Man, it all depends where the tolling booth is. If you drive on I-80 and you don't go through a toll booth, then there's no toll. And so part of this plan, and I think part of the murkiness of that ball is, where do these go? And I think that's what we would owe you in terms of, hey, here's a plan that we think makes sense for the residents of Wyoming that drive I-80 and everybody that drives across I-80 that doesn't start or stop in I-80, and the rule that you have to treat everybody the same. I think that we should be smart enough to find a sweet spot in how that all works. And I'm pretty confident we can. So, Mr. Chairman, that's a quick summary of a complex issue. And we'll stand for any questions that you might have.
Any questions for the director? Any questions? Okay. Director, a couple that I have. How do you address the issue of the fact that you have to have exhausted all your revenue sources before you can apply to the federal government for tolling authority?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I think that's a valid question. I think the initial going in position is that the taxpayers have not passed extra revenue generating bills, and see how that goes. But Mr. Chairman, that's certainly one of the requirements, and I don't know how the federal highway will look at that.
Director, one last question I have is, so you mentioned a couple times approval of the legislature on this bill or the whole process. Now I see the legislature potentially passing this bill, but I don't see anything in the bill that then brings anything back like the master plan for approval of the legislature. I believe there's a different term used, but it's not approval. I think it's consideration is the term. How do you address that issue?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I went back. I believe that's addressed on page 13, line 4. When I read that, when I say, line 7 on page 13 says that we'd submit it to you for consideration. When I see for consideration, that's for approval or for not approval, and so. Mr. Chairman, that's how I read it. If you so chose to amend that, I think that's a consideration, but that was my understanding of the intent of this legislation.
Okay, thank you, Director. Other questions for the Director? Okay. Chairman Case, please, you have more comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just once again, I think you can understand maybe the urgency of this. We don't have a plan B that's any good. We can't seem to get a fuel tax, and the fuel tax, trouble with the fuel tax, Mr. Chairman, is you know as well as anybody that they're not as good as they used to be. Cars get more better mileage, so they don't use as much gasoline. They don't pay as much fuel tax. We're shifting towards alternative fuel vehicles. We have more electric vehicles. Fuel tax will be less and less important as we go forward. The road use charge, what's your guess on how that's going to go? It didn't seem to go very well. Maybe that's down the road, but we don't have a plan B. What we got are I-80 communities sitting on a deteriorating asset that will, have you ever driven some of those horrible roads? You avoid them. You want to talk about diversion. What will cause diversion is if we can't keep I-80 up. And we've turned the curve and we can't. This takes years to accomplish and you can pull the plug. It's going to take a little work because you have to, introduce a bill. But why wouldn't we start this now? There's a wreck out there. And if I were the city of Laramie, city of Rollins, I would want this to happen because it'd have a plan for how the most important asset in my community is going to be effective for the next 50 years.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Case, I don't know if you could just comment on the 3 participation slots. Do you know if those are in federal statute or if that's done through rulemaking, or how difficult would it be to create another slot if Wyoming misses out and those slots are filled?
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a way to answer that. The department said it was in statute, and I guess subject to check, I'll go with that, sir. I just feel that we have to act as a legislature. We have to be responsible. Responsibility means we have to make a decision and pursue what's on the table because we don't have anything else. And if we decide that it's a bad fit, then we stop pursuing it and we instruct the department to abandon the plan. But we have to do that with legislation. Otherwise, we don't have anything. We have a deteriorating road, poor economic conditions for these communities, worse outcomes for roads around the state, which are just a spillover, bad roads in Casper, bad roads to Teton County. We need to do this. Honestly, we do. You don't like it next year? Pull the plug. You found a better idea. Mineral prices go up. Coal's back. Sequestration works. You pick your scenario. I want every one of them. We got to run the state in the meantime. And this gives us a shot. Thank you, sir.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Noting the time and keeping in mind that we probably have a special session coming up this summer, I would offer a motion to table at this time.
Second, okay. Motion to table and a second. For the audience, that motion is not debatable. We just vote, and it is in order. So with that, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed, no?
No.
Okay, the ayes have it. The bill is tabled, potentially pending a special session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, I would ask that you hang with this committee. We were going to look at this in the interim and potentially before the special session. And I think it's something we need to further look at, further develop, and would ask for your help and input as we go forward.
You, of course, have it.
Thank you.
We truly are in a desperate situation in Wyoming. We need to be proactive. Thank you, sir. Thank you, members of the committee.
Any other business for the committee? With that, we are adjourned.